Sometimes, the coldest nights bring the warmest truths. In a forgotten alley of Philadelphia, a woman searching for silence stumbles upon a soul long abandoned, chained, trembling, and bearing the weight of something no creature should ever endure. This is not just a story about a dog. It's about memory, sacrifice, and the fire that never dies. Welcome to Veil Marks, where stories breathe and scars speak. If you believe that love can resurrect, that even broken hearts can guide us home, then stay with us, watch to the end. This video holds a truth too powerful to miss, and a lesson that might just change how you see the world. The wind had teeth that night. It didn't just blow, it hunted, slicing through coats, nipping at skin, leaving even the streetlights trembling in their glass cages. Philadelphia had gone still, blanketed under a snowstorm that made the city look like it had been erased and rewritten in silence. The kind of night where the cold doesn't just touch your skin, it reaches inside and sits in your bones. Elena Graves pulled her scarf tighter, the wool damp from her breath. She was 38, tall but slightly hunched from years behind the camera, and tonight her boots left deep, solitary tracks on a sidewalk no one else dared to walk. Most people had tucked themselves away hours ago, but Elena had stayed late at a gallery shoot across town, her first paid gig in weeks. She didn't mind the solitude. She was used to it. She passed an old electrical substation, one of those square concrete buildings the city forgot to tear down, when something stopped her, a sound. Barely there, a high-pitched whimper, thin and fleeting, almost swallowed by the wind. She paused, turned her head, nothing but shadows and snow. Then it came again, faint, like the sound of hope giving up. Her heart skipped. Most people would have kept walking. Elena should have, but something in that sound, fragile and apologetic, rooted her to the spot. She stepped off the plowed walkway and into ankle-deep snow, boots crunching loudly in the hush. As she neared the substation wall, her breath caught. There, barely visible beneath a tangle of frostbitten vines and wind-blown debris, was the shape. She knelt, pushing aside a fallen board and shards of ice. What she saw made her stomach twist. A puppy. No, not just a puppy. A Pitbull. Young, maybe 4 or 5 months at most, his body curled tightly against the cold, his fur stiff and wet, matted with sleet. A rusted chain bit into the concrete wall, disappearing into the snow and reappearing around his neck. His coat, once perhaps a warm caramel brown, was now dulled by ice and dirt, but it was the scar that stopped her. Around his neck, just beneath the chain, was a thin pink outline. A burn? No. It curved too perfectly, like a flame etched into his flesh. Elena reached out, gently brushing the snow from his face. He didn't flinch. He didn't move at all. Only the faintest puff of mist escaped his nose, a breath so quiet she might have imagined it. She whispered, "Hey, hey, sweetheart." Her voice cracked from cold and emotion. She didn't know why she was crying. There was something wrong about it all. Not just the cruelty, though. That was bad enough. But something deeper. Something familiar. She looked into his half-closed eyes, glazed with pain and cold, and felt a memory stir, not a clear one, just the echo of a feeling, of warm fur beneath her fingers, of another winter long ago, a barking voice calling her name, a tail wagging in slow motion. Rusty. The name shot through her like lightning. Rusty had been her childhood dog, a Pitbull, too, loyal, goofy, always at Jesse's side, her younger brother, who disappeared 5 years ago without a trace. Rusty had died in a car crash that winter. Elena hadn't thought of him in years. Until now. This couldn't be a coincidence. The wind howled louder, snapping her back to the present. She shrugged off her coat and wrapped it around the dog, lifting him gently from the snow. His body was stiff, his paws like ice against her wrists. She stumbled once, knees threatening to give, but she held on. The weight in her arms felt both impossibly light and unbearably heavy. She whispered, "You don't get to die tonight." "Not on me." It was a 6-block walk home. The snow stung her cheeks, visibility down to feet. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the scarf around her neck soaked through. People passed, hoods up, heads down, not seeing her or choosing not to. That didn't matter. She could only focus on the faint rhythm of the dog's breathing against her chest. Her apartment sat above a closed antique bookstore. It was small, with creaky floors and windows that never quite sealed. But tonight, it was sanctuary. She kicked the door open, carried the dog to the living room rug, and turned up the heater until it groaned. She wrapped him in blankets, rubbed his paws, pressed him to her chest again. "Come on," she whispered. "Stay with me." He didn't move, didn't even blink, but something inside her refused to give up. She sat there for an hour, maybe more. The room was quiet, except for the low hum of the space heater and the ticking of an old wall clock. Her phone buzzed once. She ignored it. Time slipped sideways. Her only focus was the fragile rise and fall of his chest, a heartbeat against hers. She didn't name him right away. Names were promises, and promises hurt when they broke. But somewhere between midnight and dawn, he stirred. His paw twitched. His ear gave a little flick, and when his eyes fluttered open just enough to see her, she knew. "Blaze," she murmured. "Your name is Blaze." He didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, two hearts, long frozen, began to thaw. Morning crept in like a secret. A soft gray glow filtered through frost-laced windows, barely touching the corners of Elena's living room. The snowstorm had settled into stillness. But inside, the world was quietly holding its breath. Blaze hadn't moved all night. His body lay wrapped in two blankets, and Elena's coat, positioned just inches from the space heater that hummed steadily in the corner like a mechanical lullaby. Elena had barely slept, sitting on the floor beside him with her back against the couch and her legs numb from being still too long. When the first twitch came, a tiny, almost imperceptible flick of his paw, she leaned forward so fast her shoulder popped. His breathing was no longer shallow and rattling. It was deeper now, slower, steadier, a rhythm instead of a gasp. Then, slowly, his head turned, his eyes opened halfway, muddied brown, glazed with exhaustion, but focused, and then he blinked. "You're awake," Elena whispered. Her voice cracked. He didn't bark. He didn't move to stand, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Recognition. Like he was seeing her not just as a figure in the room, but as something familiar, something safe. "I thought I lost you," she murmured. "I didn't even know you, but I couldn't lose you." She placed a bowl of water near his mouth, and he made a weak effort to lift his head, lapping once before resting again. Then, Elena did something strange, impulsive. She reached over to the dusty bookshelf and pulled out an old photo album. She hadn't opened it in years. It was green leather, frayed along the edges, with gold trim faded from sunlight and time. She flipped through page after page until she landed on the one she'd been avoiding for years. There they were, her younger self with Jesse standing in the backyard beside a squat, muscular dog with warm brown eyes and a ridiculously oversized red bandana tied around his neck. Rusty. He had been their best friend, their shadow, their laughter on lonely days. Rusty had once pulled Jesse out of traffic when he was 7, yanking his little body back with his teeth just seconds before a truck roared by. He'd slept at the foot of Elena's bed every night for 10 years. And then, one winter night, their car had spun off the road. Rusty had lunged across the back seat, shielding Jesse as glass shattered around them. Elena could still remember holding his broken body, whispering that it was okay, even though it wasn't. Blaze stirred beside her. Elena glanced down. His eyes were locked on the photo. Her breath caught. "You see him," she whispered. "Don't you?" She turned the album so he could see it more clearly. His gaze didn't waver. When she reached forward and pointed to Jesse's smiling face, Blaze let out a quiet whine. Elena's fingers trembled. She stood, walked to her closet, and dug through a box she hadn't touched in years. She pulled out Jesse's old flannel hoodie, Still faintly smelling of peppermint gum and old cologne, she laid it beside Blaze. He nosed it gently, then pressed his head against it like it was a pillow he'd been missing all his life. She sat in silence, staring. This wasn't normal. Blaze didn't just react like a traumatized animal clinging to safety. He was responding to people, memories, photographs, scent, emotion. Elena picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. She hadn't spoken to Dr. Theo Kim in nearly 3 years, not since her last rescue dog passed, but he was the only person she trusted, with questions like the one now pounding in her chest. The phone rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice answered. Elena? His voice was calm, clipped, and warm in the way only Theo could make it. I found a dog, she said. A Pitbull, abandoned in the snow, chained to concrete. He shouldn't be alive, but he is, and I think there's something wrong with him. Theo didn't pause long. What kind of wrong? Not sick, not injured, just different. He responds to voices, pictures. He reacted when I showed him a photo of Jesse. Jesse, my brother. More silence. I need to see him, Theo said. Within 30 minutes, Theo was at her apartment, carrying his black leather medical bag and wearing the same windbreaker he always wore, no matter the weather. He moved efficiently, checking Blaze's vitals, his pause, his temperature. Then, gently, he reached for the back of Blaze's neck and pulled out a handheld scanner from his bag. Elena watched as the device buzzed once, then flashed an alert. Code type, encrypted neural ID. Access restricted. Theo's brows drew tight. He tried again. The screen blinked red. Chip recognized. Emotion-based response. Calibration embedded. He looked up. This isn't a normal chip, he said. It's not even a civilian ID chip. It's a feedback processor. In English, Theo, this chip is reading and reacting to Blaze's emotional state. That's how it's tracking him, and how it's syncing with outside signals. Signals? Behavioral feedback, emotional mapping, even neural links. This is advanced, tech military or private neuropsychiatric research. I've only seen this once before. In a DOD proposal about companion dogs for PTSD therapy in soldiers, Elena stood still, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Are you saying Blaze was built to feel? Theo exhaled. Built to mirror, to respond, maybe even to connect. He may have bonded with Jesse, if Jesse was part of the research team, and if Blaze was his assigned subject, then that connection could still be there. Her knees buckled. She sat heavily on the couch, staring at Blaze as he curled tighter into Jesse's old hoodie. This was never just rescue, she said. Theo didn't respond, but in the silence, Blaze's tail thumped once, slow, but certain. The next day began with a knock. Not frantic, not threatening, just 3 quiet taps on Elena's door, enough to make Blaze's ears twitch and his body go still. He didn't bark. He simply stood, alert but oddly calm, as if he recognized something in the silence behind the door. Elena opened it slowly. A woman stood there, early 30s, wrapped in a second-hand peacoat that had seen better winters. Her curls were pinned beneath a knitted cap, her expression caught somewhere between worry and regret. Slung across her shoulder was a messenger bag, faded with time. Are you Elena Graves? She asked. I am, Elena replied cautiously. Can I help you? My name's Maya Rosario. I used to work at a place called the Flameborn facility. I think we need to talk about your dog. Elena's pulse jumped. You know Blaze, not by that name, but I've seen him before. She stepped aside to let Maya in. Blaze didn't retreat. He walked forward slowly, nose lifted toward Maya's scent. And then, as she knelt on the rug, Blaze approached her not with fear, not with suspicion, but with the quiet trust of someone who once knew her. Maya didn't reach out. She let him sniff, and when he placed his head gently against her hand, she looked up, tears threatening her composure. I wasn't sure he'd remember me, she whispered. They sat in the living room, the heater humming softly beside them, Elena poured tea, though neither of them drank it. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she unzipped her bag and pulled out a small, scuffed external hard drive. She placed it on the table between them like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I stole this the night I left, she said. The night everything went sideways. Elena didn't touch it yet. What happened at that facility? Maya exhaled, eyes darting toward Blaze, who had settled on the floor nearby, watching them both. Flameborn started as a behavioral research project funded by a public-private partnership, animal cognition, emotional bonding, therapeutic service dog development. At least, that's how they pitched it to us. She looked at Elena, but it was never about helping people. Not really. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter. They were engineering emotional responders, Maya continued. Dogs that could mirror human emotions in real time. Joy, grief, anger, loyalty. They believed if they could replicate that connection, if they could program it, they could control it, use it, weaponize it if needed. Blaze shifted slightly at the word. Maya lowered her voice. There were dozens of dogs, mostly shepherds and pit bulls, but only 3 passed all the baseline scans for advanced neuroadaptive feedback. We called them the FB4 batch. Blaze was one of them. Elena swallowed hard. And Jesse? She asked. Maya's eyes darkened. Your brother was our neural systems engineer. He didn't just design the chip. They built it from his theoretical model. He was brilliant, but naive. He thought the tech would help veterans people with PTSD. Dogs who could feel what they felt and soothe them, and they turned it into something else. They started running forced empathy drills, pushing the dogs into pain loops to create faster emotional links. Jesse pushed back. He said it crossed every line. Maya paused. Then one day, Blaze reacted during a trial. Not just mirrored Jesse's fear, he amplified it. The whole system spiked. The room went dark. The readings crashed. Jesse was gone by morning. Gone? Elena echoed. What do you mean gone? They told us he quit. Walked out. Left a note. But his phone went dead, his email shut down, and his badge was deactivated before he could have even left the campus. I didn't believe it. Elena's breath came shallow now. I tried asking questions, Maya continued. They locked me out of the lab. 2 days later, Blaze and the other 2 dogs were listed as in transferred offsite. No records, no destination. Blaze made a low sound in his throat, half whine, half growl. Elena reached down to touch him. I left the next night, took what I could. That hard drive contained session logs, trial footage, internal messages. I haven't opened it in years. I was scared. But then I saw your post online, the way you described him, the scar, the photo. I knew it had to be him. Elena finally picked up the hard drive. It was cold to the touch. There's a video, Maya said softly. One I couldn't forget. She opened her laptop and clicked through files until she found it. Trial record F44027 on M4. The screen showed a sterile white lab. Jesse, slightly younger, his hair longer, was sitting beside Blaze, smaller than, still growing into his paws. Electrodes dotted Blaze's fur, a monitor tracking his pulse. Brainwave data scrolling on the side. Jesse's voice came through clear. We're not teaching him tricks. We're mapping empathy. He's not a code to write. He's a soul to protect. The video glitched, then resumed. Jesse's expression hardened. Now, if they start calling emotion a malfunction, we've lost the best part of ourselves. The footage ended. Elena sat in stunned silence. Do you think he's still alive? She asked finally. I don't know, Maya replied. But if he's not, I don't think he ever left Blaze. They looked over. Blaze was still, watching them. His gaze met Elena's. And in that moment, for the first time, she wondered if this wasn't just survival, if Blaze wasn't just a victim. Maybe he was a messenger, a living memory, a part of Jesse that refused to be erased. It started with the Bible, a small, battered King James edition that once belonged to Jesse, its leather cover cracked along the spine, and its pages thin with time. Elena had kept it on the shelf beside her bed for years, unopened, too heavy with memory to touch. But lately, every time she reached for it, Blaze would appear quietly, insistently. He would sit beside it, body tense but still, his gaze fixed on her hand like a sentinel standing guard. The first time, she thought it was coincidence, the second, maybe a fluke, but by the third time when he placed his paw gently over the closed book, as if to say not yet, Elena began to feel something deeper. It wasn't just behavior, it was intention. Maya noticed it too. He's tracking emotional cues, she said one evening, watching Blaze watch Elena. But it's not just you, it's specific. That book, that shelf, that object. Elena opened the Bible that night. For the first time in over 5 years, inside, tucked into a page near Psalms, was a folded slip of paper, a handwritten note. Jesse's writing, unmistakable. If anything happens to me, look where we used to race bikes on Sundays. The place with the chain link fence and the old blue vending machine. Truth never stays buried forever? Elena read it 3 times. Her hands shook with each pass. She looked up at Blaze. He was already standing at the door. They left at dusk. Maya drove while Elena sat in the back seat. Blaze beside her, his head resting on her thigh, his body vibrating with quiet energy, not fear, not anxiety, but purpose, like he knew exactly where they were going. The building hadn't changed much. An old supply warehouse on the edge of South Philly, once used for deliveries, now long abandoned. Faded graffiti decorated the outer walls, and the blue vending machine, just like Jesse described, still leaned against the corner, long since broken, the buttons worn smooth from use. Blaze jumped from the car before the engine shut off. He walked ahead, not fast, not slow, just sure. Maya and Elena followed, flashlights in hand. The air inside was musty with rot and rust, the floor littered with fallen ceiling tiles and broken pallets. Blaze led them straight to the back. There, beneath a collapsed stairwell, stood 2 empty kennels, not crates. Kennels reinforced, bolted to the floor, their locks still faintly blinking with blue lead lights, long since dead. Next to one of them, covered in dust and debris, lay a torn piece of fabric. Maya knelt and picked it up, her breath caught. A hoodie, faded gray, blood-crusted along the hem. There was a patch still visible near the chest, a Campus Tech logo from the university Jesse once attended, and clutched in the torn sleeve pocket, barely hanging on by a single thread, was a half-melted employee ID card. Jesse Graves. The corner was slashed clean off. Elena dropped to her knees. The flashlight trembled in her grip as she reached forward and touched the dried stain. Her breath came ragged, her vision blurred. "He was here," she whispered. Maya nodded slowly, her voice low and pained. "These kennels, they used to house the test dogs during off-site transport. Jesse must have been trying to move them, or hide them, but he never got out," Elena said, her throat tightening. "Maybe not," Maya whispered. "But he left a trail." Blaze pressed his head gently against Elena's shoulder, grounding her. She reached up and cradled his face in her palms. His eyes, steady, dark, watching, seemed to hold something beyond understanding, a message she couldn't read, a history she wasn't meant to forget. "He's not alone," Maya said. Suddenly, Elena turned. There were 3 in the F before batch, Blaze, Ash, and Cole. "We thought they were all destroyed or lost. But if Blaze made it out, the others might still be alive." Before Elena could respond, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered anyway. "Elena?" The voice was gravelly but familiar. "This is Marcus Laird. I used to work with Jesse at the investigative division. He gave me your name years ago. Said if anything ever seemed off, I should find you." Elena's heart pounded. "Marcus? Why now?" "I've been following the Flameborn reports. Quietly. Couldn't get a warrant. Too many hands and too many pockets. But this morning, I found a dog," he paused, his breath hitching over the line. female Pitbull. Young, scar across the eye. She was left behind a church in West Kensington. Barely alive, Maya leaned in, asked if she had a chipped ear. Elena did. Marcus replied, yes, right ear. Like a surgical tag. She's at the emergency vet clinic now. We're calling her Ash. Elena nearly dropped the phone. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She's real, she whispered. Blaze stood suddenly, tail flicking once. Elena looked down at him. You knew. The pieces were clicking together slowly, painfully. Jesse had tried to get the dogs out. He'd left signs, breadcrumbs only someone like Blaze could retrace. And now, one of the others had resurfaced, clinging to life behind a church's stone wall. Maybe the truth was still scattered, but it was rising like a flame that refused to die. The signs came quietly, at first. Blaze, always alert and steady, began moving slower, pausing mid-step, as if distracted by something distant, invisible. He no longer barked at the hum of delivery trucks outside, or wagged his tail when Elena returned from errands. He still followed her, still curled at her feet when she read on the couch, but his eyes, they seemed dimmer. And then, one morning, he didn't rise. Elena found him lying near the heater, breathing shallow and uneven. When she called his name, he opened his eyes, looked at her, but didn't lift his head. She rushed to him, her hand trembling, as she pressed it against his side. His heartbeat was slow, too slow. By the time Dr. Theo arrived, the sun had dropped below the rooftops, casting long shadows across Elena's apartment. Theo moved quickly, his scanner already in hand as he knelt beside Blaze. Elena, he said gently, after a long silence, his nervous system is in distress. The chip, what it's wired to do, it's been responding to emotional stimuli far longer than it was ever designed for. Elena gripped the edge of the table, her voice small. What does that mean? It means he's been carrying something inside him too much, too long. Jesse's presence, his emotional imprint. I think Blaze held on to it, not just remembered it, mirrored it. The feedback loop never stopped. And now, it's overloading him like a machine that couldn't shut off. Theo nodded. Only this machine has a heart. Elena sank to her knees beside Blaze. She placed her forehead against his, whispering soft words that cracked in her throat. He didn't move away. He just blinked slowly, as if to say he was still there, still with her. I can't let him go, she said. You may not have a choice, Theo replied gently. But maybe there's something we can still try. That night, Elena made a call to a research facility in the mountains of Colorado. Years ago, Theo had studied their work, a blend of neuroacoustic therapy and behavioral resonance treatment used on sled dogs who had experienced severe psychological trauma and frost-related damage. Most had failed, but one protocol had shown promise designed to recalibrate the emotional frequency of high-empathy canines without invasive procedures. It wasn't FDA approved. It had never been tested on chip-encoded dogs. But Elena didn't care. I'll pay for it. Ship it overnight. Just tell me what he needs. By midnight, the therapy crate arrived delivered in a temperature-regulated container marked Experimental Use Only Biosonic Therapy Protocol 7A. Inside were 2 glass vials filled with a luminescent serum and a set of audio pads that resembled small, translucent shells. Theo read through the instructions twice. Maya, standing beside him, helped set up the frequency calibrators near Blaze's bed. She said little, but Elena could see the fear behind her eyes. Is this safe? Elena asked. Theo didn't lie. No one knows, but it might give him a chance. They dimmed the lights. Elena knelt beside Blaze once more. His breath was even fainter now, his chest barely rising. She stroked the side of his neck and felt the flutter of his pulse, like the last flutter of a candle. Blaze, she whispered, if this hurts, I'm sorry, but I'm not letting go. Not yet. Theo inserted the syringe into the muscle of Blaze's hind leg. Administering the first dose, Maya triggered the audio protocol, and a barely audible hum filled the room, low, rhythmic. like the sound of wind passing through pine. Elena held his gaze the whole time, and he held hers. There was no panic in his eyes, no fear, only a quiet awareness, acceptance, as if somewhere deep inside he understood that what was happening was not an ending but a crossing. A soft whimper escaped his throat, not from pain, but from presence, from being here with her. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just stayed, as if promising her, "If you stay, I'll stay too." The room held its breath. Minutes passed, then an hour. Theo monitored his vitals. The neural feedback slowed, his blood pressure stabilized slightly. His temperature climbed from dangerously low to borderline. "He's responding," Theo said quietly. "Very slowly. But he's not rejecting it." Elena leaned her forehead against Blaze's. "You're still fighting," she whispered. And then barely noticeable Blaze's paw twitched, not in seizure, not in reflex. It reached toward her. She caught it and wept. Later, when Theo packed his bag and Maya cleaned the used vials from the floor, Elena remained kneeling. Blaze rested beside her, too weak to move, but breathing steady now. Deeper, not strong, but steady. Theo looked at her before leaving. "I don't know if he'll make it through the night," he said, "but I'll tell you this. He hasn't once stopped trying." Elena stroked Blaze's scarred neck, her voice low and sure. "I've known people who quit for less, but he's been carrying someone's soul in his chest for 5 years. Carrying Jesse. Carrying me. Carrying everything." She looked at Theo. "I don't know if Blaze is Jesse's shadow or his echo, but he's more than memory. He's love that stayed." Theo didn't speak. He only nodded and walked out into the night. Inside, Elena laid down beside Blaze, her arm across his side, her breath sinking with his. They didn't need words, because some love doesn't need language. It just needs to stay. Snow had begun to fall again, soft and slow, like the city itself was holding its breath. Elena sat by the window, a cup of tea forgotten in her hands. Blaze lay on the rug nearby, bundled in blankets, his chest rising with shallow but steady breaths. The therapy had stabilized him, but his body was still recovering. His eyes followed her wherever she moved, quiet, knowing, tethered to something only he could see. Maya had gone to sleep on the couch. Exhausted after another round of decoding the data from the drive, Marcus had promised he'd stop by in the morning with updates on the investigation. For the first time in weeks, the apartment was still, until it wasn't. A sound, a click, the soft rasp of metal against metal. Elena's head snapped toward the back door. The lock turned slowly, too slowly. She stood, heart racing, just as the door burst open. A man stepped into the apartment, gloved, hooded, his face obscured by a scarf. He moved fast, scanning the room, heading straight for the table where the external hard drive lay beside Maya's laptop. Elena shouted, "Get out." The man didn't answer. He lunged. She grabbed the closest thing she could, a ceramic mug, and hurled it. It shattered against his shoulder. Buying her 2 seconds, she ran for the hall, yelling for Maya, but the man caught her by the wrist, dragging her backward, and then Blaze moved. Despite his weakened frame, the Pitbull lunged from the rug with a cry that sounded almost human. His paws scraped the hardwood floor as he crossed the room in a blur of fury and loyalty. He leapt, his jaws clamping down on the attacker's forearm just as the man raised a fist toward Elena's head. The scream that followed wasn't Elena's. The man staggered, Blaze hanging on with teeth sunk deep into muscle, growling with a guttural sound that echoed off the walls. Blood spattered across the floor as the man swung his arm, trying to shake the dog free. Elena screamed for help, and then the front door crashed open. Federal agent. "Don't move." Marcus Laird burst into the apartment, gun drawn, followed by 2 plainclothes officers. The attacker froze just long enough for Blaze to fall back, his body collapsing onto the floor. The officers tackled the man, forcing him down, cuffing him as Marcus called in backup. The room spun. Elena dropped to her knees beside Blaze. His fur was damp with blood, not his, but his breathing was shallow, ragged. "You saved me," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Even now, you still save me." Marcus approached, shaking with adrenaline. "He's one of them," he said, pointing at the man now restrained on the floor. "Works for a shell nonprofit Hartwell Bio Foundation. Guess who sits on the board?" He handed Elena a photo pulled from his phone. Miranda Kerrigan, a name that once stood for grace and animal welfare, founder of one of the country's most beloved ethical research initiatives, dozens of awards, countless galas, always photographed beside rescued pets and smiling children. She's been laundering research through fake therapy programs, Marcus said. Flameborn was hers from the beginning. Jesse's work, Blaze's chip, it all leads back to her. Maya, now fully awake and gripping a kitchen knife she hadn't needed, joined them, eyes narrowed. "She always stayed clean," she muttered. "Let others get their hands dirty." "Well," Marcus added grimly, "tonight someone got caught." As officers dragged the attacker to his feet, Elena noticed something fall from his jacket. A lanyard. Hospital issued. She bent to pick it up. Her heart nearly stopped. Patient Access ID. Jesse Graves, Research Participant Volunteer Institution, St. Dimphna Center for Neurological Recovery, Fairhill, Pennsylvania. Elena blinked. "He's alive," Marcus nodded. "They didn't kill him. They institutionalized him, registered him as a volunteer in a long-term memory response study, paid off the right people, kept him drugged and quiet. I tracked the money trail. Hartwell's fingerprints are all over it." Elena dropped to her knees beside Blaze. He had his head on the floor, but his eyes were open. She touched his cheek, trembling. "Blaze," she whispered, "did you know?" He blinked. "Did you remember?" All this time, his tail moved once, weak but certain. She pressed her forehead to his and wept. "You never gave up. Not on me. Not on Jesse. Not on any of us." Theo arrived minutes later. He moved to check Blaze, applying a small oxygen mask and administering an anti-inflammatory injection. "He'll need more rest," he said. But the fact that he moved attacked even in his condition? That's not just instinct. That's loyalty in its purest form. They wrapped Blaze in blankets and laid him gently near the heater. Theo checked his vitals again and nodded. "He's stable, but we have to be careful." He used every ounce of strength he had tonight. As the officers cleared the apartment and Marcus arranged the chain of evidence, Elena sat silently beside Blaze. Maya reviewed the drive again, cross-referencing names and locations. It was all finally connecting, every thread pulling toward the center. Elena whispered, "We're going to bring Jesse home." The storm outside picked up, wind pressing against the window panes in low moans. Snow gathered along the ledge, thick and blinding. But inside the apartment, warmth pulsed like a heartbeat. Blaze slept, wrapped in soft light and deeper meaning, a living promise that even in the coldest corners of the world, love not only survives, it fights, it remembers, and when needed most, it returns. The snow was gentle, this time, not the howling storm that had once nearly claimed Blaze's life, nor the blizzard that had buried the city in silence. This snow was quiet, more like a curtain descending on the final act than a threat. And for the first time in a long time, Elena Graves stood outside, not with dread in her chest, but hope. Blaze had survived. Not just the surgery, not just the neural overload or the long recovery. After the attack, he had survived everything. And so had Ash, now stronger, her fur grown back over old scars, her gait steadier by the day. And Jesse, dear Jesse, was no longer lost behind hospital doors and stolen files. He was home. When Marcus had walked into that institution with a federal order in hand, Elena had stayed up all night waiting, and when the door finally opened, when Jesse stepped into her apartment with sunken eyes and shaking hands, clutching a hard drive full of Flameborn's internal research, Blaze had been the first to rise, limping, unsteady, but alive. He had walked to Jesse without hesitation and rested his head against his chest, like he was finishing a journey. He'd started years before. Jesse knelt. He didn't speak. He just cried, one hand on Blaze's back, the other over his heart. Now, 2 weeks later, the city had begun to thaw, and the plaza downtown was lined with folding tents, strings of soft golden lights, and a hand-painted banner that read, "Emotions are not a flaw. They are our fire." The outdoor fundraiser had been Elena's idea, but it was Blaze who had made it happen. His story had gone viral after the attack news outlets had picked up the footage, highlighting the illegal programs and the emotional trauma these dogs had endured. With Jesse's files, federal investigators had moved quickly. Miranda Kerrigan's assets were frozen. The Hartwell Bio Foundation collapsed in days. The Flameborn project was over. But the scars remained in bodies, in hearts, and in the quiet corners of memory. That's why they were here. The plaza buzzed with gentle energy. Families walked between booths offering warm cider, knitted scarves, and photographs of rescued dogs now living full, joyful lives. Near the center stood a ringed enclosure where Blaze, Ash, and 2 other therapy-trained rescues rested on fleece mats, surrounded by admiring children. Blaze had changed. His coat had regained its luster, his gait stronger with each passing day, but his eyes, they held the same flame, still quiet, still watching, still waiting to give more than he took. Elena stood beside him, a scarf wrapped snugly around her neck, her gloved hands holding a camera. Jesse was nearby, speaking softly to a local journalist, explaining the science behind the project that nearly erased him. Emotion, he said, was never the error in the code. It was the part they couldn't control, and that's why they tried to destroy it. The journalist blinked. "And what saved you?" Jesse smiled faintly, nodding toward Blaze. "Love. Loyalty. And a dog who never forgot." Elena turned toward the pen as a woman in a thick navy coat approached, holding the hand of a small boy no older than 7. His jacket was too big, his hat slipping over his ears, and his eyes, large, pale blue, looked hollow. "This is Liam." The woman said, "We heard about your event from the recovery center. I hope it's okay we came." "Of course," Elena said gently. "Is Liam. He lost both his parents in a house fire last year. He hasn't spoken since, not a word in 9 months, but he loves animals, especially dogs. We thought maybe..." She didn't finish. Her voice caught. Elena knelt, gesturing toward Blaze. "Would you like to say hi to him?" Liam didn't answer. He just stared. Blaze, as if summoned by something only he could hear, rose slowly and walked to the edge of the enclosure. The handler unlatched the gate and let him out. He padded softly across the snow-dusted ground and stood before Liam. Then, slowly, he lowered his head and placed it gently on the boy's boot. The moment held. Liam blinked. His lips parted. And then so quietly, Elena almost thought she imagined it. He whispered, "Fire doesn't go out," the woman gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Elena knelt beside them, blinking through tears. Liam crouched slowly, his gloved fingers brushing over Blaze's head. He didn't smile, not yet, but his eyes changed. They filled, just a little, with something warm, something alive. When the evening wound down, the crowd gathered around the main square, where a small bronze statue had been unveiled beneath a circle of pine and fairy lights. It stood only waist-high, a sculpture of a Pitbull, head lifted toward the wind, scars gently traced into its form like constellations. Etched into the base were the words, "Here, fire was not extinguished, it was reborn." Jesse stood beside Elena. Maya, Theo, and Marcus gathered behind them, each holding a small candle that flickered gently in the wind. No one gave a speech. They didn't need to, because in the hush of that snowy night, everything had already been said by the way Liam had spoken again, by the warmth of Blaze's silent vigil, by the way strangers had become family beneath a shared cause. Elena looked down at Blaze, who now rested at her feet. His tail thumped once, then again, slow and steady. "You did it," she whispered. "You came back from everything?" And you didn't just survive. You saved us. Blaze looked up at her with those flame-dark eyes, and Elena knew deep in the marrow of her being that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning, because sometimes healing doesn't arrive with thunder or applause. Sometimes it walks on four legs, limping from the cold, eyes full of memory, heart full of fire, and when it rests beside you, you are never the same again. Blaze was never just a pit bull. He was a bridge between past and present, between pain and healing. Through him, we rediscovered the truth, that emotion is not weakness, but the very thread that binds us. As Maya once whispered, some fires are meant to burn, not to destroy, but to illuminate. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe to Veil Marks. Your support is not just numbers. It's the reason we keep writing, keep filming, keep believing. With your help, we're one step closer to 1,000 subscribers, 1,000 hearts, 1,000 hopes. Thank you for watching. Remember, some stories are more than stories. They're second chances in motion,